Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 35, Master Sergeant Jeff Averette, Command Senior Enlisted Leader, Marine Corps Software Factory, Austin, Texas. In this episode, Jeff and I explore the intersection of Marine Corps traditions and cutting-edge software development. Top goes on to share his journey of adapting to leadership in a technical environment, the role of the software factory in shaping the future of the Marine Corps, and how we're empowering Marines to drive innovation today. This episode sheds light on the importance of creative problem solving, fostering talent, and adapting to the evolving landscape of military technology. This episode is available in two versions, an abbreviated one that runs just under an hour, available on all podcast platforms, and a subscriber-only edition on Apple Podcasts, which includes the full-length interview. In the subscriber-only edition, you'll gain access to additional in-depth discussions, including exclusive insights hard-earned along Top's journey, behind-the-scenes stories from the software factory, and more detailed conversations about the future of talent management in the Marine Corps. This extended version offers a richer understanding of the challenges and opportunities that come with leading Marines in a tech-driven environment, providing invaluable lessons for current and future leaders. By subscribing, you're not only getting more content, but supporting the podcast, enabling us to continue bringing high-quality, in-depth conversations with game-changing leadership in the Marine Corps and beyond. Whether you're catching the standard version or subscribing for the full experience, thanks for tuning in.
It's a little soft through these things.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You get used to it.
So I've been doing this thing, this Top Game podcast, since I want to say 2018, somewhere around there. I had been out of the Fleet Marine Force for like 8 years and was selected for Master Sergeant, and I tried to wiggle out of orders to Okinawa, but it wasn't happening. The monitor at the time for the 2600s was Master Guns Willie Pasqua, his Master Sergeant at the time, and he's like, I need you in Oki. And I was the only knucklehead that had put Okinawa anywhere on their dream sheet, because a mentor of mine by the name of Jay Confer, part of the Marine Cryptologic Office, had said, "Hey, Sam, Okinawa is the Marine Corps' best kept secret." And he wasn't wrong. But I put it on my list, and of course, I was probably the only one that put it on their list. And so west we went, so far west that we were in the Far East and on the other side of the international date line. And we ended up loving it. But I had this sense of inadequacy, professional paranoia, maybe it's imposter syndrome, that I wasn't going to be enough in that role because I had been outside of the Fleet Marine Force and the greater community for so long. And so what I did was, kind of a little bit of a mixture between Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink, started sitting down with staff and COs who I knew, loved, respected, looked up to, admired, in order to ascertain what it was that I needed to catch up on, and then how to find some level of balance between our personal and professional responsibilities. And eventually I settled on this idea or this concept. If Sergeant Castro could sit there and listen to Master Guns Hartman and Master Guns Owen, two mentors of mine, and have a conversation, and me just to have the opportunity to just be a fly on the wall and not interject, not interact, just observe, listen, and then capture what were the takeaways, what would be the potential takeaways from those types of conversations. And that's kind of where this thing came from. And from the beginning, it was understandably very 2600 centric. And then I started to branch out and get some other occupational fields, MOSs in there, few officers, predominantly staff and COs, but a few officers, chief warrant officers in particular. And then, I got a Sergeant Major Marquez, Sergeant Major George Garcia, the third brother of mine. He was a former 2600 now, and he's the director at the Staff and CO Academy out in Camp Pendleton, if I'm not mistaken, last I checked. But, one of the things that I haven't done sufficiently in my time as the DCI SEA is start to bring in some of these long ball hitters from some of the other occupational fields under our portfolio as it pertains to information as a warfighting function. And the other thing is, highlighting specifically for this interview, some of the magnificent things that are currently underway here in Austin, Texas. It's a little known secret in terms of what it is that you all are doing. And some of the, I would say, opportunities that exist here to be able to do more with less, the understanding that more is not better, better is better. And there's an aspect where here, in a very unique and advantageous fashion, the Marines are learning while they're doing and delivering. And the time that I spent with the Marines yesterday in my, was a 2-hour Master Guns TED Talk with some back and forth, understandably, but by design, man, these Marines are just loving what they're doing. And, morale is through the roof. I asked one of the Marines, are you a dreamer? And the first one was like, is that a rhetorical question? Master Guns? But later that evening, I was sitting down with the other sergeant, whose last name escapes me right now. What?
Maxwell Idler.
Yeah, Idler. He told me in the lobby bar at my hotel, he's like, Master Guns, I was hoping you was going to ask me. I said, well, what would you have said? Fuck yeah. And he's like, I would have said, fuck yeah. And so then this morning, I'm talking to Colonel Bach as I'm, coming into the building and getting set up, for our almost a 2-hour office call between just he and I. And I told him, I said, Idler was kind of upset that I didn't ask him if he's a dreamer. So when we come out of the office, I ask him, I said, Idler, are you a dreamer? Fuck yeah, Master Guns, I'm a dreamer. Oh, good. But, a lot of the magic of this place is that you're allowing these Marines to realize their fullest potential in strange and unusual ways. And it's illuminating the path of where we need to go as it pertains to data centricity, information as a warfighting function, and also the amount of creativity that is exhibited here. The Marine understands that there's a problem. How do we solve it?
Hey, if there was a problem, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it.
You get what I'm saying? It inspires them, and they have this fire and this passion. Like, how do you not enjoy your time here? For you, as the senior enlisted leader in this, strange and unusual location, what have been some of like the defining moments that you've had individually and then maybe even collectively?
Okay, so for individually, you mentioned at the very beginning about feeling like you have imposter syndrome. I definitely did the same. Moving from what I've done for the past, it'll be 20 years next month, to direct support of the lieutenant colonel in the type of position that he's in as the director. It was there were many times that I felt like I was an imposter, it was great to be here. Was happy the entire time. It's like, God, I don't deserve to be here. Like, what am I doing? And it took me about 6 to 8 months for me to realize that I wasn't doing the job the way I should be, and that was expected of me by him and the Marines. And I'm very operationally minded and attracted to it. So that anytime anything about an application or a potential application or anything to do with the FMF would come up, I would quickly deter from my actual responsibilities as a senior enlisted, doing all the different administrative contracting, just everything in the office, and completely neglect that because that's what I love. So it took a while and a little bit of like getting to know myself better to realize how to pivot, and I did, and the adjustment hasn't been too complicated. I thought it would be horrible, because I don't like doing administrative stuff, but yeah, that was one for me. And then the second part was for the Marines.
Yeah.
I think we're just now to the point where we're out of the honeymoon phase, and everybody's like fully settling in, and really kind of witnessing what we're doing here, what limitations they have and don't have as far as their education and continuing to better themselves. I've told quite a bit of people, because we've been challenged before, and asked, like, how are you going to mentor these Marines, like continue to evolve these Marines, teach them, let them grow and get their experiences? And my response is, well, my Marines in the past year have visited more FMF units than most Marines will in a 20-year career. They are getting exposure to all of it. when most Marines just sit in their little stovepipe of their MOS and just hop from whatever battalion to battalion to battalion. So I think the biggest reward, in my opinion, for them is that very young exposure to all of it. They get to know exactly what the MAGTAF does, its roles and responsibilities, and then they get to learn about the systems that they can create software for to better support them and enable their commanders in the decision-making process.
So primarily, you all have 06s in this venue, and a lot of that was just predicated on that's where we carved the structure from out of DCI IC4 to start this pilot initiative, Silicon Valley startup, so to speak, here in the middle of Texas, by, with, and through the partnership that we have with the Army Futures Command. From everything I've seen and observed and heard and read and engaged in my interactions, has been a phenomenally positive, beneficial, mutually beneficial relationship between us and the Army. And we came through here sometime back with General Glavy. I think this is my fourth time here. And I always learn something new. And it's almost like, for me, it's reinvigorating every time I come out here. One, because I love Texas native. But the other part is just to see the enthusiasm that's represented here and the ingenuity and the initiative that these hard charges bring to the fight. But what scares me is that we're potentially limiting the talent pool in terms of who we bring here. And has anybody talked to you about maybe expanding it out to other occupational fields within DCI portfolio or elsewhere in the Marine Corps through the screening process?
Absolutely. So we've had everything from E6, E7, CSO get a hold of our application and apply for it, all the way down to an admin clerk. Like, if we go look at my application roster, you're going to see a variety of MOSs that heard about this and want to be here. But the unfortunate truth right now is we can't accept them. In the future, the goal is to be able to have it any MOS or primary lat movable into MOS. That way we can actually take or employ that talent that is across the fleet in this environment.
And so, as I was talking to Lieutenant Colonel Bach earlier this morning, the Marines coming out of this is just my perspective. One person's observations, and maybe there's some bias associated with this, but this isn't just an 06 thing.
Not at all.
And they come out of here, and I think we've yet to determine like where this fits neatly. I don't think it does. It reminds me in a lot of ways of language training, pun intended, because they are learning software, development, software engineering that's done in a variety of different languages.
Correct.
But we're not going to give them foreign language proficiency bonuses or pay like I get for speaking Spanish and testing on it regularly. Has any of that conversation come up in terms of kind of spitballing and whiteboarding with the Marines? Like what is it going to take to retain them on the back end of this experience and post their utilization tour?
Okay, so knowing that you have a soft background, also,
I don't.
Thought you were a MARSOC.
You thought I was a MARSOC guy. I'm going to take that as a feather in my cap. But no, I'm not. I had some time at Special Operations Training Group as an instructor evaluator. Not the same thing. And when it was time for me to make my final approach into MARSOC, I was diverted down a different path by then General Stewart with a tour within the Defense Attaché System service of DIA. And I did about 3 years in total between training and assignment with DIA at the embassy in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. But no, I'm not a SOCSF guy. Okay. But I could probably play one on TV, depending on who you ask.
Sounds good. So the SOCs get a 5-year rotation, and then they're pushed back out to the fleet for utilization. So coming from there prior to being here, that was a huge attrition calls for them. Like we were able to keep SOCCs in because they were being forced back out to the fleet. And like once they would make it to the fleet, they wouldn't be utilized in the way that they were with all the capabilities they were given and trained while they were at MARSOC. So, very disgruntled Marines. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So before these Marines will PCS back to the fleet to do their normal jobs, our goal is to actually have this established as a unit in MLS. That way their next landing place is at a software development platoon under one of the MEFs or the MIGs for further utilization.
But right now, that's completely aspirational, right? That doesn't
Correct.
exist. And part of the conversation that I'm going to have with General Carter as the new DCI, who's not had the opportunity to visit as of yet. We just passed beyond our 30-day initial observation period, which a lot of that was just observe and assess, observe and receive, readouts and wave top executive level briefs on what the respective divisions in DCI are undertaking on a daily basis, and projected opportunities, challenges, so on and so forth. But when he comes out of the executive offsite, there's going to be a requirement for us to get to the MEFs and engage in those venues. And so he's probably not going to be able to get to Texas anytime soon with, once you start factoring in November and birthday ball season, holidays, and so on, which is one of the reasons why I came out here alone. Stopped off in San Antonio, met with some of the Marines down there from MCSB, because there's some things that they're doing that not necessarily replicate or mimic, but they're potentially amplifying or supporting what it is that you're doing here at an unclassified level in an open environment. I foresee down the road future graduates or alumni from the Marine Corps Software Factory going into certain elements within the intelligence community where we have a established placement, access, structure. But where it gets weird is that they won't be 06s
Mm-hmm.
in those formations. And that's not completely true. We have some stuff through Marforce Space and elsewhere. But one of the discussion points that we had yesterday was you guys need to be read in appropriately, sufficiently informed rather, and so that you're not working with your blinders on. You can see the bigger picture. And I think there's opportunities to be able to provide that. And I know that, as a pilot initiative, we're usually hard pressed to sufficiently resource those pilot initiatives. And I know we had talked in the past about, getting your guys the primary weapon systems that they needed. Did we ever resolve that? Do I still owe you anything on getting them government furnished equipment that they can use in a manner that's unencumbered by connectivity and all of that, just so that they can create?
I was able to source it with end-of-year funds last year. So they're working with some pretty robust devices, powerful devices.
So what are they using?
They're using Dell performance machines, just really high-end specs.
And that's hitting the mark.
Absolutely.
They're loving it.
Especially with TAC and us working on
Tactical Assault Kit, WinTAC.
Right, because it's an .NET framework. So initially we were having to spin up a Windows VDI on the Apple computers and then code for that. But having these Windows machines, it makes night and day. It speeds them up so much better. So I know the machines we have are powerful enough to actually host a GPT on it.
So I apologize because we got just straight into it, but I want to shift gears a little bit, kind of go back to your story.
Mm-hmm.
And for the record, full name?
Master Sergeant Jeff Averette.
I've been pronouncing it Averette.
I'm probably just saying it wrong.
We're
country boys from North Carolina. So
you're from North Carolina originally? Family history of service in the Marine Corps or military? None of that?
No. Me and my cousin joined. Well, he joined 2 months before I did, but other than me and him, that's it.
What service did he go into?
Marine Corps.
He was a Marine. What was his MOS?
He was a tow gunner.
Tow gunner. And you came in knowing you wanted to be a comm guy?
Absolutely not.
What did you
No,
want to be?
I wanted to be an aircraft mechanic. I went to college before I came in.
It's a tale well told.
Yeah, for automotive technology. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go work on aircrafts.
Where did you go to school?
It was a community college in Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah. And then you got lost on your way to college, ended up finding your way to a recruiter. How old were you then?
I was 20. No, I was working in a dealership by then.
Okay. So you'd actually graduated, got your certificate or
Correct.
associates,
My certification.
Certification.
ASC certifications.
and then was doing that, but it wasn't
I just always wanted to join. So like,
it wasn't hitting the mark.
this is probably going to shock you. So I'm actually a high school dropout. I dropped out in 10th grade. So in the state of North Carolina, it's going to be kind of long-winded. State of North Carolina, if you're not currently in high school or 18, you cannot get a driver's license until you're 18. So dropping out at 16, I'm just sitting around. So I decided to go work with my mom's boyfriend tying rebar. So we actually built the parking deck at the Raleigh-Durham International Airport from the age of 16 to 18.
Okay.
So I went and did that.
2 years of dedicated service.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, he was a Marine Scout sniper. So he was a Marine Scout sniper. So I was working with him every single day, 6 days a week, working, from 05 to 1700, just being around him and seeing what his mentality and demeanor was like as, prior Marine sniper, kind of like embedded that thought that I wanted to be one also in my head. So when I turned 18, was able to get my driver's license, went to college, did 1 year of that, got my certs, and then went and worked in a dealership. And then it was still like, it's kind of boring. I still want to go in. So I went, joined, and 2 months later, I got that phone call like, hey, we had a spot open. You want to go? Like, sure. And then get the maps and it's open contract. Like, oh yeah, you're leaving early. So you get up like, oh shit. Okay. So they put me in for DASC, Direct Air Support Operations Operator. So
Yeah.
radio operators for the air wing. And I failed that
Data
school.
links and all that stuff, right?
It was really just setting up the DASC part of it. So it would have been on the comm side.
Okay.
But just going through that comm school or their comm school in 29 Palms and all the acronyms, I'm like, what is going on? Like I bombed it horribly. So they transferred me over to be a satellite operator. So satellite or GMF, Ground Mobile Forces, satellite communications operator and maintainer. So I went through that school in Augusta, Georgia, graduated that, went to 9th Combat Battalion, deployed 3 months later to Iraq for a year. So
I already know this, but what I don't know is what's your wife's name? Like, what does she do?
Marcella, she actually works here.
She works here.
Yeah, she's a part of the college staff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what's her background? Is it in education or is it?
No, she's been a hairstylist for over 20 years.
And then diversified upon arrival and
Absolutely.
was able to get into the system. Did they provide her any level of like support or like preferential, employment?
Yes.
They did?
For the military spouses, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's almost like when a Marine gets out and they go to apply for a police officer position, you get a couple extra points
Okay.
towards your test or, your rating. So
That's great to hear. So
Texas is amazing when it comes to military, like active duty, retired, and their families.
that is true. If you heard of the Hazelwood Act, I'm sure you have being here.
I haven't.
Once your federal benefits expire, if you enlisted from Texas, the Hazelwood Act kicks in and you can get essentially almost a second GI Bill, but it has to be at a public university, a state-funded university. It's my understanding, and I'd have to look this up, is that there was a lawsuit that challenged the limitations of having to enlist from Texas for people that eventually become citizens of Texas to afford them access to the Hazelwood Act as well.
I can see that because a lot of Marines want to retire here because they don't tax your, you don't have to pay, land tax?
Yeah, if you, depending on your VA rating, there's a rubric that they use, and if you homestead your property, you won't have to pay. You don't have to pay as much, or you don't have to pay any land taxes at all.
Yeah, then that's huge.
Yeah, I'm looking up to see if there was a lawsuit in the news. I don't have a young Jamie.
Yeah. Scribe.
Yeah, to look it up for me. But
Can I circle back to something that we talked about yesterday?
Sure.
So just for the listeners, we talked about his Centurion initiative, and I really like the idea of growing these Marines for these specialty things when they're very young, and slowly like just adding more and more and more and more to their armory, their intelligence armory, or how do you see we get after that from private? Like how do we start that? Like we can do it now with some of the sergeants and above, but how do we get that going from
the
day
beginning?
one?
The answer, as is often the case with most things like this, when it comes to change, is carefully balancing speed and trust, so we can move fast and fix things to build the type of warfighters that we need going forward, particularly on the enlisted side, to deliver a more capable, more credible, more competent, more lethal master gunnery sergeant in our formations. And, some of it, came up in my interactions with my peers at the E9 level, working at 3-star, higher, external command senior enlisted leaders. I've had the opportunity to broach this subject with Chief Bruce from NSA Cybercom, Chief Master Sergeant Simmons, Spacecom, who are natural and seamless pipelines to employ Marines within that organization at different levels. Guys like Master Sergeant Bowden, an artillery staff NCO, serving as a senior enlisted leader in Colorado, that understands fires and space. And I mean, like, it's
Is that mountain of a man you were talking about?
Yeah, he looks like he could bench press at Ford Festival. I wish I would have recorded an episode with him. I have to go back and do it. Yeah, he and I, we hit it off immediately. He's one of those guys, like, if, we were junior Marines at Radbin, I would have fought tooth and nail to get that son of a bitch on my team, right? I had a lot of latitude when it came to team composition on my deployments. And then when I was being countered by higher, I learned to appeal to the appropriate senior enlisted authorities to counteract those efforts, and just using almost like a linguist should, right? The appropriate phrases, eloquent logic, forceful assertions at the perfect point in time and space. Almost like, what was the phrase that Colonel Bach talked about today? Nunchi, right?
Having nunchi. That doesn't have a definition, just the meaning.
It's got to have a definition, man. Like, I get that there's probably not a perfect nunchi Korean. There's got to be like something on this. Korean concept signifying the subtle art and ability to listen, engage others' moods. Maybe emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Central importance to the dynamics of interpersonal relationships, literally translated as I measure. There's some other terms associated with that. I'll hold off on taking us down that rabbit hole. But coup d'oeil is and I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the stroke of the eye in French is another relevant and related term. As it goes with the Centurion piece, any idea that potentially disrupts or shakes the foundation of how we've always done things immediately agitates the permafrost and the antibodies and the friction points and the obstacles and the fence sitters, the feet draggers, the naysayers, in this adversarial fashion. And the quote that I shared with the Marines yesterday is something that I stole from General Glavy from Machiavelli. There's nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. For the innovator has enemies in all those who profit by the old order, and only lukewarm defenders in all those who would profit by the new order. And this lukewarmness arises partly from fear of their adversaries and partly from the incredulity of mankind, who do not truly believe in anything new until they have had actual experience of it. And so how do we embolden or encourage these people who would potentially benefit from this to leap and take action? This last Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps Symposium, we covered this, and as well as a bunch of other topics, in 2 one-hour sessions for different audience groups. But this idea of fighting smart in the fight for talent, in the fight for information, and understanding that as we're currently man trained, equipped, organized, structured in the Marine Corps, there are areas in which Marines will transcend the category or the bin that we placed them in initially. And so these young Marines here who start off as 06s now attain this compelling, exquisite skill set, have become something different. And so we probably have to take a better look at how we employ them on the back end, much like we had to, or much like we didn't do with the SOC-Cs. And I've had some interesting conversations with senior Marines from the 06 community, staff and CO peers of mine, who made the assertion that Marine goes through the MARSOC process, becomes a SOC-C, and all that that entails, and it is no longer optimally placed within the Fleet Marine Force, that they're ruined. That was the word that was used to describe it. And discretion being the better part of valor, sometimes I held my tongue and just earmarked that for later. And it's frustrating to me that we're not employing these Marines in accordance with their capabilities. We're not elevating them in a manner that is going to answer to why they joined the Marine Corps in the first place. And for some of our highest performers, it's about challenge, it's about purpose, it's about impact and leaving this thing better than they found it. And so I got to ask, you're doing that here. How's it feel?
It feels great. I do have to hop back for 1 second. So with the SOC-Cs, there was somewhat of a correction and a pivot. So Master Gunnery Sergeant retired Eric Sims. While he was there, he did establish a reciprocity with JCU and pretty much unwritten MOU with MMEA to allow SOC-Cs to be able to transfer directly to JCU or recon battalions and vice versa. So like the JCU Marine communicators can come straight to MARSOC, don't have to go through the training. They reciprocity each other's training to make those follow-on opportunities, so we don't lose those heavy hitter SOC-Cs because they're about to go to a Marine Wing Support Squadron to be the radio chief
or the help desk guy.
SAR processing
at MSgt.
Right.
Yeah. There is an element where those guys are no longer just comms either. And and I've had this conversation time and again with senior leaders from some of the respective OC fields under DCI. If I put a calling message out to the different OC fields, to the entire Marine Corps, to solicit for nomination packages to replace me as the DCI Senior Enlisted Advisor, contingent upon the understanding that if you compete but are not selected, runners-up would be assigned orders to be a MIG operations chief. The interest in competing at that point in time diminishes tremendously.
Really? I like operations though, so I'm like, okay, I'll try.
Kind of my point is, I need people who are willing to come out of their stovepipes and look at the bigger picture. And software and data centricity is where this organization here in Austin is centered and focused and fixated. And there are seamless and natural tie-ins across the entirety of the Marine Corps in multiple locations, up and down echelons of the organizational structure. And I just don't know if we've sufficiently conveyed that to the greater tribe.
I would agree. It's starting to catch on quickly. So with the My Career app, the data that we were able to pull off of that came out of all of those interviews and being able to collect, like, okay, this specific MOS, we would get more retention if they were allowed to lap move to some type of aviation thing or X, Y, and Z. So just add whatever retention mechanism incentive to that, and we're now being able to pull that data from these interviews and adjust and modify like next year's retention incentives to assist in the retention efforts. What's strange is MMEA has all that data, and then was it MMIB? There's one other branch. I can't think of the acronym right now, but there's another branch that was just here visiting us, Captain Gannon, and I told him about that, and he lost his mind because normally they just go in a room. They're like, okay, let's give this MOS up in bonus. Let's reduce that bonus. Let's do X, Y, and Z. They have no data to go off of what the actual Marines are saying. We interviewed over 11,000 Marines last year. There's data there. Like, make the decision off of that. And through those different interactions from the different agencies, even at Headquarters Marine Corps, and they're starting to learn about one another and learn how we're data brokering for these different organizations.
That's an interesting term, data brokering. Yeah, because and General Glavy used to go off on this quite often. What are you doing with the data?
Exactly.
And it just like vanishes. It's ignored. But we could leverage that to better inform our decision-making processes, to get to that desired end state and start to impact recruitment and retention in a manner that keeps us moving in the right direction. And make no mistake about it, and General Smith was the one that said this to me, like face-to-face, eye-to-eye. Master Guns, talent management is a blood sport. And I've treated it as such since that interaction. But unfortunately, when you start to grab Marines and place them where we don't necessarily have the structure, it gets strange and wonky. And it's going to be one of the key friction points with the Centurion program. On the Intel side, they've pushed towards this 8299 Senior Intelligence Leader MOS, where you would elevate from being a 0291 or a 2691 to be an 8299. And the idea would be that those are the up and out assignments, and there's probably got to be some rigorous and consequential education training attached to it. But those would be the guys at the MEFs and the MAR4s and other locations. But 8299 only gets us so far as it pertains to just intelligence. I have a responsibility and obligation to more occupational fields than just those. And so what's the 8299 equivalent that goes even further into the entirety of information warfare and strategy? And where I've settled time and again as I've thought through this problem a bunch of different ways is it's probably going to be in the 17XX community. And I know talking to Colonel Bach today, he's talked about maybe this is a 16XX Ockfield that we build with some of the efforts, not only here, but elsewhere that we've been doing to include maybe with the 2652s and the data engineering, data science piece to this. Started off from, years ago, I'm going to say like 16, 17, 18 timeframe. Master Guns, now retired, Sam Carter, was pushing for ISR systems engineers to become more than what they had historically been as 2651's SI communicators. And that's received some traction and it's produced some substantial outcomes. And now there's a Nova Community College pipeline associated with that, but it's not exclusive to 2600s any longer. We're looking to broaden the aperture because we're starting to see that where we're headed as a Marine Corps, as it pertains to force design, as it pertains to the future operating environment, and the value of taking that data-centric approach to warfighting and everything that we do. It's not just intel, it's not just targeting, it's not just fires or command and control or just comms. It's in recruiting, it's in retention, it's in manpower and reserve affairs. It's like it doesn't end, it doesn't stop, and it almost transcends definition by the old definition set that we have of occupational fields. It almost has to be kind of like MCMAP, right? Where you get you drop your web belt, now you got a tan belt, and down the road, you might be a red tab, black belt instructor trainer. And that's where it gets difficult because we still have to adhere to grade adjusted recapitulation and occupational field health and DERS readiness reports and prioritization of authorized strength reports. And I mean, like, this almost defies the numbers system that we play. And that's been one of the strongest criticisms to what I'm proposing with the Centurion program and this game-changing talent strategy framework, is that I still got to play by the old rules in order to create something new.
I think your initiative's achievable. I do think it's going to take a change in the actual processes of how we train our enlisted Marines and how the training and certification impacts their promotion. I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time, and I feel that we allow Marines to be promoted just by hitting their PME wickets or Chiefs course, but we also have this other multi-million-dollar application, MSgt, that we have to answer to. So PME has to be a check in the box. Chiefs course for some MOSs has to be a check in the box. Then why do we have MSgt? If we're not holding that training, MOS roadmap, MOS manuals, TNR standards, why isn't that affecting promotion eligibility? I say that because I think when we get to that point, that will re-enable the Marines to actually be in charge of training their Marines.
I'll put you on the spot.
Shoot.
You said check in the box in a pejorative fashion. Do you think that the PME as it currently exists is just going through the motions?
Yes.
So your last PME event, what was it?
It was the E8 seminar.
And how did you come away from that experience?
I see the point of it. There's some Marines out there that don't have a lot of exposure to a lot of different things within the FMF. They don't, might not have the same outlook on it and have been stovepiped or whatever situation they would put in. They actually could come out of that with gained knowledge that made them better. I don't feel like it was much of an impact. I feel like I went through, just the process to get the check in the box. And that's why I've suggested to them, like, add another week, add in Lean Six Sigma training, or it's escaping me right now. What's the other
Agile,
one?
Scrum
Master training. And let us walk away with that with some type of managerial certification, because we're going there to be better leaders and managers of Marines. Make it worthwhile, other than people like me or a lot of Marines out there saying PME is just checking the box. Make it valuable to the actual human, not just the Marine profile.
Yeah, I've had mixed experiences during career with regard to professional military education. I always loved it in terms of the opportunity to back away from the day-to-day and focus on my own personal growth and development during those timeframes, and usually did more than was asked of me in terms of the assignments. And then my own, I am admittedly an autodidact. I teach myself where I find the experts and I learn from them directly without necessarily having the burden of being in a rigid, formal classroom environment. And it's stood me well over the test of time. It's taught me how to learn faster. One of the things I was sharing with you yesterday, if there's a book that I have to internalize, not just consume or ingest and just pass through my system, like, fast food. If it's something that I need to become part of my brain housing group in perpetuity, I'll read it in a physical form factor, like preferably a book. Maybe it's a digital form factor in terms of a digital book, an ebook, but I'll also listen to it simultaneously. And then key elements that I have to hold on to, I'll write out by hand in my notebook and hold on to it. And it's something that I learned when I was at the Defense Language Institute. I didn't have strong, I would say, study skills going through high school because I didn't have to. I've always been a phenomenal test taker and played to that, skipped out on most of my homework because I was just being lazy. Ace a test, but have about a C average from regular assignments. That bumps me up to maybe a B minus or a C plus. And, that was passing. But that's not how I approached it at DLI. And as I had the opportunity to kind of reset, recalibrate, I was 23, 24 at the time, and genuinely applied myself. And that's, some of what the Marine Corps has provided me is that sense of direction, that sense of purpose, and an opportunity to capitalize on my potential, on my aptitude. And I see a lot of that with these Marines here. And like just their excitement. For me, it's awesome. Like I said, I enjoy every time I come here. And that's what makes this different. This is not a check in the box.
No, not at all. No, they are enrolled at Austin Community College for the technical accelerator.
Regionally accredited.
Correct.
Rigorous and consequential education and training, doing while they're learning and delivering real value to the Fleet Marine Force in real time.
Correct.
So if you could go back in time and talk to the sergeant version of yourself for an hour or two, what wisdom would you impart upon that Marine?
The first thing would be to take care of myself better. Coming up in the early 2000s, mentality was different back then. Like, light duty, you fucking pussy. Yeah, just dig through it. Okay, well, I'm 9 surgeries later now. Hit 20 years in a month. I would argue that case, or argue that mentality. Like, my body hurts. Like, hey, dumbass, like, take care of yourself better. Like,
yeah,
if you need to take a knee, take a knee. Don't overdo it.
Yeah.
It's same thing with mentality that I have to tell the Marines here. This isn't a physical job by any means. I'm not saying they're fat slobs. You've seen them. The listeners can't see them, but
they're fit.
They
Every
are.
single one of them.
Yeah. But I believe the mental fatigue is a lot worse on a human than the physical fatigue.
No doubt.
Because I've seen them go from being fresh to completely just
drained,
brain just almost gone. It's like, you need to stop. You need to take your ass home, go get some rest, take tomorrow off. I'll submit you in for leave right now. Go rest. Leave your computer here. Stop working. Go get some rest. Stop, turn it off for a minute. Like, you need to slow down. It's kind of like the guy that wants to run. What's his name? The marathon runner that'll wake up and just run a marathon. Cam Haynes, the hunter.
Mm-hmm.
He goes out and runs a marathon every morning. Like, you're crazy. No, you can't do that. Something's gonna break. Same with their mentality or their mental status. So that's the advice I would give myself. Like, just take care of your mind and your body better. And who gives a shit what somebody thinks about you if you're hurt? Like, they're not the one paying your bills. They're not the one promoting you. Fuck them.
What advice would you give to the next senior enlisted leader here at the software factory coming behind you? Like, what's going to be part of your turnover?
So the mentality that you described of what you do up at DCI and the one that I attempted to describe in the same way, I know that my job is to take care of, for you, the general, that lieutenant colonel. Make sure that he has everything that he needs to be able to do his job on our behalf to keep this thing going. You need to have that mentality instead of trying to be on the fucking production floor doing the cool shit with the Marines. That's their job. Your job is to fucking assist him and advise him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that part gets hard.
It does.
And so yesterday when I'm talking to the Marines and I flash up that image of Luke and Yoda, that always lands with the junior Marines, the idea that you're not always going to be the hero. At some point in time, you're going to be the guide. You're going to be the mentor. You're going to be the lore keeper in order to compel or support or provide some level of understanding that is yet to be attained directly through experience to the Marines coming behind you. And sometimes that's difficult to accept. But, for me, I was fortunate because one of my master gunnery sergeants by the name of Dave Owen, he's now a civilian working at Cybercom, retired 2691, told me that, and I was a sergeant, your mark will not be determined by your individual accomplishments. It will be better determined by the accomplishments of the Marines from your team that go on to become team leaders themselves? And how many of those teams also produce team leaders? And when he put it to me like that, I was like, that makes perfect sense. And so when I had team members that became team leaders in and of themselves and saw them surpass me as they do, and others that got out and then now became fathers and husbands and leaders in their own right in the civilian sector, and we've maintained that connectivity over time. And I mean, it's been humbling. And to some extent, I felt like had I left the service to go on and do other things outside, I think I would have been fine. I would have done well for myself. But I don't know if I would have been able to accept the uncertainty of what I could have done if I'd have stayed in. And, this idea that you just mentioned about having this unique opportunity to create more opportunities for those coming behind us. And it kind of goes to something that was discussed in a recent session that I had as I'm developing the storyline, the pitch deck for the Centurion program, is this idea that power is not defined by what it can destroy, but rather by what it can create. And what I love about this place is how you're empowering these Marines to demonstrate innovation and ingenuity and creativity to the point that the level of difficulty and the complexity of what they're doing, when compared with their tradecraft and their expertise, hits this center line that establishes this sensation of flow accompanied by time dilation. And they're just in the moment and loving it. And it's infectious. And I hope that everybody that comes out here gets to experience and see that. But more importantly, I hope that we continue to push this such that it trickles out and the rest of the Fleet Marine Force gets to benefit from it. And Top, I'm telling you, your mark is being felt here. And I'm in standby mode waiting to help. All you do is just need to let me know.
Roger that. Thank you, MSgt.
Anything else you want to convey? I will ask you though, as you think about that, as I'm starting to grab staff and COs from different occupational fields, who in your mind needs to be part of this podcast in a future episode?
Master Sergeant Mike McGrath from JCU. He's sitting in the same exact position I am for them because they have a software factory also. But that's a hell of a Marine. And if I could have picked anybody to be me, like be in my spot instead of me, it would have been him.
That's awesome.
He's a hell of a Marine. Jesse
Is he better than
McMahon,
you?
He is. In every way.
You didn't hesitate at all.
No, and I say that very humbly. Like, he's a badass. Like, he's just, yeah.
Okay.
He's what should have been here instead of me. Master Sergeant Jesse McMahon. That just so happens to be that guy's mentor. So, if that speaks any volume to the quality of that human. But those two are amazing. Master Sergeant Ingersoll. I got the John Ingersoll. He's out at 1st Recon. And there's more as I think of them, but that would be a great, more than one person. That'd be a great group podcast, having those three in a room together.
So I usually do it one-on-one like this. It allows for a little bit more of an intimate connection again. Although I have done some instances where there was a group of us, but they had all been interviewed individually before there was a group of us, but I didn't release that. But I was going back through and I was mining some of the audio that I'd captured in the past. You asked me how many podcasts I've done. I've done about 50, but I've only released like 35.
Okay.
But that's one of them. I also did a podcast interview with Jocko Willink.
Really?
But I punted into the bleachers, dog. I had a different setup, right? You know, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. And when I was using an iPad, it wasn't the lightning cable to the Shure mic specifically designed for iOS wasn't fully seated. So it recorded off of the internal microphones of the iPad, not the...
So it sounded like he was sitting way over here.
Yeah, I mean, and I did my best to run through and fix it, but I've just kept it as a personal. I've not shared it with any or many people, but we do have a connection. And if I asked him to come back and record again, I think he'd be more than happy to do so. There's an aspect where I enjoy where this podcast sits just beneath the radar as an artifact, almost like a Jedi holocron, available for those who need it, those who find it, those who use it, but not necessarily elevated, skylining
Right.
all of us unnecessarily. One of the TTPs that I've learned that works best in the podcast game is finding a micro niche. And, you know, for us and the information portfolio, staff and COs, with some, you know, outliers here and there, it seems to hit the sweet spot. All of the feedback that I've received from senior Marines to junior Marines, retired Marines, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I've been asked to shorten them, but then I've had more people tell me, no, keep it just like it is.
Just this is unscripted, and we're just talking. I don't even know what time it is because I took my devices off. So it's like
we've been doing this for almost 2 hours now.
This was nothing. As far it doesn't feel like it.
It's effortless.
Yeah, this was great.
But there's also this other aspect that I wasn't really prepared to accept or understand or had not even conceived. But a mentor of mine by the name of Rich Dudo, Master Gunnery Sergeant, now retired, who was a huge history buff, particularly with regard to Marine Corps history. He's like, Sam, these are audio biographical sketches of some of our very best leaders. And this is important. And you need to understand that. You need to be aware of that. That kind of made me feel woozy when he first said that to me. Took the wind out of me. Because I hadn't really contemplated in that fashion what this thing is. It was originally just me taking advantage of every opportunity to be mentored by guys that I look up to or admire or respect, and some of which may even be, from an organizational perspective, junior to me, but had so much to offer in terms of what I could learn from an in-depth interaction engagement such as this. But instead of holding on to it unilaterally, packaged it up and shared it with those that may eventually find it. And it's been just one of my TTPs to incremental improvement over a sustained duration of time towards unattainable perfection in all things that we do, which, kind of going back to where we started, is an indication of imposter syndrome. And with that, we out.